I'm Laura Trevelyan in Washington, and this is BBC World News America. The mayor of Kyiv warns that Ukraine's capital is facing a dangerous moment. 6 powerful explosions hit a metro station and residential buildings in Kyiv. A curfew lasting 35 hours has now begun in the city.
There is a real sense that the danger, the conflict is coming closer, and a feeling here now that nowhere is safe.
Russia says it's now in control of the entire region of Kherson to the south. We hear from people living under Russian occupation. The court in Russia has fined the TV journalist who staged a protest against the war in prime time. She held up a sign reading, "Don't believe the propaganda." As peace talks with Russia continue, a key concession from President Zelensky, who says Ukraine should accept that it will not become a NATO member.
And I'm Yalda Hakim on the ground in Lviv. The UN says more than 3 million Ukrainians have fled the country in the past 20 days. Almost half of them are children.
Welcome to World News America on PBS, the UK and around the globe. Ukraine's capital is under heavy bombardment tonight. That's despite another round of peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. In a dramatic show of support, the heads of 3 European governments went to Kyiv earlier and met President Zelensky. Ukraine's leader addressed Canada's parliament today. Tomorrow, he'll speak to the US Congress. And the White House says President Biden will go to Europe next week for a summit of NATO leaders. Overnight, Russian airstrikes on Kyiv intensified, killing 4 people. Residential buildings were hit, along with a metro station. Yalda Hakim is in Lviv, to the west, close to the border with Poland. And Yalda, is the war inching closer to you tonight?
So we'll have to see how things evolve and move in the next days. And of course, we will be following all the developments very closely here from Ukraine. But for now, back to you in the studio, Laura.
Yalda, thanks so much to you and to your team tonight. While in Russia, the journalist who interrupted the TV news on Monday to protest against the war in Ukraine has been fined 30,000 rubles. That's $280. Maria Ovsyannikova ran on set carrying this poster reading, "Stop the war, don't believe the propaganda." It was an unprecedented moment of dissent against the Kremlin, which millions watched from their living rooms across Russia. She appeared in court today, charged with organising an unauthorised public event, and she spoke afterwards. Caroline Davies in Moscow. Staying with Russia, and Iran's foreign minister was in Moscow today, as Moscow says it's received guarantees that Western sanctions over the war in Ukraine won't affect its trade with Iran. Talks to try and revive that deal, limiting Iran's ability to make a nuclear weapon, are reaching a critical stage. Michael Singh is the former Middle East director for the US National Security Council. I asked him how exactly the war in Ukraine is affecting calculations about rebooting the Iran nuclear deal. Now, 20 days after Russia invaded, 3 million people have now fled Ukraine. Millions of others are trying to reach safety. Many are travelling on Ukraine's rail system, one of the world's biggest. The network is also a lifeline that brings essential supplies into the country. Our special correspondent, Fergal Keane, is in Lviv and reports on the massive effort to keep Ukraine moving. And just before we go tonight, let me show you some pictures coming in from Kyiv, where President Zelensky has been meeting the Prime Ministers of Poland, the Czech Republic and Slovenia. They arrived by train earlier in a massive show of European support for Ukraine. I'm Laura Trevelyan. Thanks for watching BBC World News America.
Most people aren't sleeping. They can't sleep. They're sleeping with their phones, or they're doing what we call doom scrolling, seeing what the bad news is.
They're filling the bottles and filling the crates. There is a real sense of feeling that these weapons could soon be needed here.
It's an air of desperation. There are thousands of people along this platform. Can any train possibly take the number of people who are here?
The Russian invasion of Ukraine on BBC News.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching Context on BBC News. Standing in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, 3 European leaders travelled to Kyiv for a meeting with President Zelensky. The Polish Prime Minister said it was a risk worth taking, with the wider security of Europe now hanging in the balance. Another super yacht seized, this time in Barcelona, as more oligarchs are targeted by European authorities. Russia today became the most sanctioned country on earth. And Volodymyr Zelensky, actor turned politician, now wartime leader, will speak to the film director who worked with the Ukrainian president before he stood for office. Tonight, with the context, former NATO Deputy Secretary General Rose Gottemoeller, the former British Culture Secretary Ed Vaizey, who now sits in the House of Lords, and from Kyiv, Anders Östland, a contributor at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. Hello, a very warm welcome to the programme. Half the population of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has fled, many heading into neighbouring countries. But coming the other way today were the leaders of Poland, the Czech Republic and Slovenia. The 3 men took an early morning train from the border and travelled through front lines to a city under curfew to show solidarity with President Zelensky. It was a remarkable gesture from 3 leaders who see the fate of their own countries bound tightly to that of Ukraine. And while they were in the city, they would have heard the war approaching. There was no let up in the bombing. 4 further attacks today, all of them on residential areas. For his part, President Zelensky was again appealing to the West. Today he spoke to the Canadian Parliament. Tomorrow it's the US Congress. He gives the same message. He gets the same standing ovation. But his frustration is mounting. How many more cruise missiles have to fall, he asked, before you close the skies? Very soon, there will be no way out of Kyiv. The Russians will encircle the city and the people will be left to fend for themselves. And as Ola Gurin reports, there will be no mercy for the civilians. They are the front line. Yeah, it's these personal stories that remind you the cost of a war like this. Anders Östland in Kyiv, you're indoors tonight. 35 hours of curfew, day and night, certainly signals a new level of emergency. Does it feel to you like the war is getting closer? Well, let's get a flavour of how this would have been seen in the Czech Republic. Peter Pavel is a retired army general. He was also the chairman of the NATO Military Committee. Rose would probably know him very well. He's been telling me that their Prime Minister's trip to Ukraine was originally kept secret from the people of the Czech Republic. General Pavel there in the Czech Republic. Pressure growing on President Biden to offer more. Some lawmakers in Congress wanting to supply the older Soviet systems that the Ukrainians would have been trained on. But clearly they're making no secret, Anders, of what they are sending. The trouble is President Zelensky has told the BBC in the last few days that what they're using in a day is what the Europeans are getting to them in a week. So it needs to be stepped up. And obviously, as you were saying, once the Russians do encircle the city from the south, it's going to be much more difficult to get things into the capital. Certainly it's spooking the international markets. 2 of the biggest falls on the Hang Seng in recent time over the last 2 days. We're going to talk about sanctions a little later in the programme, but I want to turn to President Volodymyr Zelensky himself, because before Russia invaded Ukraine, he was derided in some parts of the world as the actor, comedian turned unlikely politician. Well, not anymore. Compare his role, in fact, over the past few weeks to that of Ashraf Ghani, who fled Kabul before the Taliban had even arrived. Zelensky is leading from the front. Every day there's a new video. Zelensky in his office, Zelensky with his staff, Zelensky appealing to the Russian people. He rallies his troops. He evokes in ordinary Ukrainian people, and maybe beyond Ukraine's borders, a spirit of defiance that has blunted this Russian advance. So where does it come from? Well, joining me to discuss is the film director David Dodson. He's a friend of Volodymyr Zelensky. In fact, he worked with him on 10 separate films. Welcome to the programme. So you know him better than most. Where does it come from? We're going to have to leave it. Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd love to talk about it more. But David, just very quickly, yes or no answer. Have you been in touch with him since the war started?
No, I haven't. That is impossible.
Well, David, thank you very much to you. And thank you also to Anders there in Kyiv. Do stay safe there, Anders. Thank you for being with us. We're going to take a quick breather. We'll say goodbye at this point to our UK viewers who are about to join the 10 o'clock news. And a reminder, the second half of the show will be on iPlayer if you want to catch it later. For world viewers, we'll be back right after this break. Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching Context on BBC News. Thousands flee Kyiv as the Russians shell Ukraine's capital. In Mariupol, more than 20,000 people escaped the besieged city today, but reports are that the Russians are holding an entire hospital hostage. Tightening the screws, the EU and the UK announced another swathe of sanctions against Russian entities. And just a fine and on your way, the Russian editor who protested on state television avoids jail time. Tonight, with the context, the former NATO Deputy Secretary General, Rose Gottmuller, and Ed Vaizey, former Conservative MP, now a member of the House of Lords. We are almost 3 weeks into this conflict. President Putin still insisting his special military operation is going according to plan. But there are some in Moscow who do admit the campaign is not progressing as the Kremlin had hoped. Not everything is going as fast as we would like, said Viktor Zolov, the chief of the National Guard. The Pentagon would agree. They've been telling us for days that the Russian advance has almost ground to a halt. So where has it gone wrong? And how have the Ukrainians managed to frustrate them? Here's our security correspondent, Gordon Carrera.
The Russian offensive continues to make only slow progress. Their original plan of a lightning strike failed thanks partly to so much secrecy that some of the Russian forces seem to have been unprepared. That combined with bad intelligence of what reception they would get.
Gordon Carrera reporting. Well, let's dig a little more into that. With us is the retired Major General Mick Ryan. He's in Canberra. He served for more than 35 years with the Australian Army and was most recently the commander of the Australia Defence College. General, thank you very much for being with us. You've written a very interesting thread on social media today about the Russian invasion and how it unfolded. Plan A, you said, was the cheap and fast route, that Ukraine would fall in a matter of days. Plan B was the creeping multi-axis attrition. Commit all the troops, hope they buckle. And they haven't. So what is Plan C? Major General Mick Ryan, we're very grateful for your time this evening on the programme. We hope you'll come back and talk to us some more. Fascinating talking to you.
Thank you.
President Zelensky has called for a full trade embargo of Russia. We're not there yet, but the news certainly is tightening. Today there was another round of sanctions announced by the UK and the European Union. On the British list, among 370 new entities, were Russia's former president. There he is, Dmitry Medvedev. Also there, Mr. Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, and the Russian Foreign Affairs spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova. All of them labelled as Russian propagandists. Also on the list, the export of high-end luxury products to Russia has been banned and new import tariffs imposed on hundreds of goods, including a 35% import tariff on Russian vodka. One other thing of note, the Spanish Prime Minister has confirmed they've seized a 140-metre super yacht, the Valerie, which was in for repairs in Barcelona. Here's the EU Trade Commissioner on what the sanctions amount to. Well, let's bring in Dr. Maria Shagina, who has been looking at the impact of these sanctions. She's at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs in Zurich. Thank you very much. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the UK sanctions, but I sense there was an element of catch-up in the last week or so. Do the British and European sanctions now look pretty similar? Maria Shagina, thank you very much for being with us. It's good to get your expertise this evening on sanctions. There's a couple of other issues that I want to look at. Let me start with you, Rose. I want to talk about the security of journalists, because clearly reporting from around Ukraine is crucially important so that we know what is going on. But we've had a number of journalists who've been killed in recent days, and three of them were travelling in one car. They all belong to Fox News. So Pierre Zakrzewski, he's the cameraman there on the left, the Ukrainian producer Alexandra Kushinova in the middle, who was only 24, and then on the end there is Benjamin Hall, who was wounded in that same attack outside Horenka, close to the capital. And of course, just a few days ago, Rose, we were talking about the American journalist Brent Renner. It's more than a coincidence. It almost looks now, given that these journalists are travelling around with TV plastered all over their cars, that they're being targeted. No. Well, as you say, incredibly brave. I know she does have a Ukrainian mother, and she felt incumbent that she should say something. But we're seeing it leach into other areas as well. The captain of the Russian football team today also saying that he wouldn't join the national team. So it is starting to drip through in certain areas. We are out of time on the programme. We could talk for much more on the events in Ukraine today. Ed Vasey, Rose Gottmuller, thank you very much for being with us. Lovely to see you both again. And don't forget, we will be back at same time tomorrow, half an hour later than our normal time. But do join us for that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.